As I entered the field, I had many fears, doubts, and questions. I didn't feel equipped to be teaching math concepts I didn't even fully understand. My main question was, how do I effectively differentiate instruction if all of my students are on a completely different level of understanding? This was a much harder expectation to uphold than I ever imagined it would be, but through trial and error and lots of hard work, I experienced much growth in my teaching. One of the areas where I grew the most was found in the attention I gave to my students. Reflecting back over many of my lessons, I realized that I was focusing on one of my students significantly more than the others. I did this because he was always listening, answering, and participating, so my attention was naturally drawn to him. But I also realized in doing this, my other two students were being left behind because I was not equally including them in the lesson. After recognizing my weakness, I made it my main goal to direct my instruction towards all of my students instead of just one, and I was able to see much improvement as the time went by. When it came to my lesson objectives, I began to realize that stating the objective at the beginning isn't all there is to it. The objective must clearly and explicitly be maintained throughout the entire lesson, beginning, middle, and end. Thinking of engaging and interactive assessments that directly matched my objectives was also a challenging task. In the very last lesson I taught, I felt that I had finally reached this expectation. I was teaching subtraction with regrouping for the second week in a row, and I used a game for my assessment that ended up being extremely beneficial in connecting everything back to the objective. I had my students roll dice to create their own subtraction problems. On colorful note cards, I then had them put the larger number on top, subtract, and show their work using pictures or base 10 blocks. I had placed two little buckets across the room. One was titled Regroup and the other Don't Regroup. After creating and completing their problems, the kids then got up and put their note cards in the correct bucket. My students loved this activity, and I believe it was so beneficial because the link between the assessment and objective was unbreakable. Every single step allowed me to observe whether or not they understood the task at hand. Behavior management was definitely a challenge for me. I found it difficult to remind my students of the behavior rules in such a relaxed teaching environment. However, I learned how important the repetition and practice of behavior is. I learned that being stern and setting firm expectations can truly build the entire foundation of a lesson. As my eyes were opened to this fact, I began to bring back the behavior cue cards we used at the beginning and address the ones that needed improvement. When I did this, immediate progress was made, and I learned just how essential the repetition of behavior practice is. In my own math history, I remember constantly feeling left behind and lost. My attitude towards math was entirely negative, and the only thing that made a difference was the few teachers who understood the importance of differentiating instruction and hands-on learning. At the very beginning of this semester, I made it my goal to understand the non-traditional learners, and I believe I accomplished this ambition. Because the traditional way of learning didn't work for me, this influenced my teaching in the field. I did my best to consistently bring positivity to the table, include engaging activities, and have patience towards all students no matter how long it took them to understand. This experience will impact my future classroom in many ways. As I've already mentioned, it is my goal to teach math, and all subjects for that matter, in the most interactive and engaging way. I learned from this experience that hands-on, visual learning truly makes all the difference. Therefore, it is my goal to ensure that my future classroom is full of engaging, hands-on, and visual experiences. I want to thank Abilene ISD for allowing me to have this opportunity. I also want to thank the 3rd and 4th grade teachers at Taylor Elementary for providing their classrooms, time, and most of all, their students.